Welcome to my YouTube channel. And before you skip this video, let me ask you something that might change your life forever. What if I told you that a simple nickel sitting in your pocket right now, a coin you've probably handled 100 times without a second thought, could be worth an absolutely staggering $614 million? Yes, you heard that right. Not thousands, not millions, but hundreds of millions of dollars for a coin that most people would use to buy a piece of gum or toss into a charity jar without even blinking. This isn't some fantasy or clickbait exaggeration. This is the real, documented story of the 1973 D Jefferson nickel, a coin so rare and so valuable that finding one could literally transform you from an everyday person into someone wealthier than most lottery winners could ever dream of becoming. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a nickel, something worth just 5 cents, suddenly be valued at $614 million? The answer lies in a combination of minting errors, extreme rarity, historical significance, and the absolutely insane world of coin collecting where passionate numismatists will pay almost any price to own a piece of monetary history that no one else can possess. The 1973 D Jefferson nickel we're talking about today isn't just any ordinary nickel that rolled off the production line at the Denver Mint. This particular coin represents one of the most extraordinary minting anomalies in United States history, a mistake so significant that it created what collectors now consider the holy grail of modern American coinage. But before we dive deep into exactly what makes this specific 1973 D nickel worth more than some small country's entire GDP, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because I'm also going to reveal another Jefferson nickel from the early 1970s that's worth even more money, a coin so valuable that when you hear its story, you'll be checking every nickel you've ever seen with a magnifying glass and a racing heartbeat. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next, because these coins could literally be hiding in your change jar, your old coin collection, or even in circulation right now, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize their worth. Now, let's talk about the Jefferson Nickel series itself and why the early 1970s were such a critical period for these coins. The Jefferson Nickel was first introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel and featuring a left-facing portrait of President Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his famous Virginia home, Monticello, on the reverse. For decades, these nickels were produced in massive quantities at multiple mint facilities including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with billions upon billions of these coins entering circulation to serve the everyday commerce needs of Americans across the nation. By the time we reached the 1970s, the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, striking hundreds of millions of nickels each year to keep up with the growing economy's demand for small denomination coins. The 1973 D nickel should have been just another ordinary year in this long production history, with the Denver facility churning out approximately 384 million nickels bearing that date and mint mark. However, something went terribly wrong, or perhaps wonderfully right, depending on your perspective, during the production process that year, creating a minting error so extraordinary that it would become the stuff of legends among serious coin collectors and numismatic scholars worldwide. The error we're discussing involves what's known as a wrong planchet strike combined with a dramatic off-center minting mistake. But not just any off-center error. We're talking about a coin that was struck so far off-center that it barely resembles a nickel at all, combined with the fact that it was somehow struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination. Imagine the chaos on the mint floor when quality control somehow failed so spectacularly that a blank planchet meant for a quarter found its way into the nickel striking press. And then imagine that same planchet being fed into the press at such an awkward angle that when the dies came crashing down with their thousands of pounds of pressure, they only partially struck the metal, creating a coin that shows maybe 20 or 30% of the intended design while the rest remains blank. Smooth metal with just the curved edge of the striking visible like a crescent moon. This type of error is called a major off-center strike on wrong planchet. And it's the numismatic equivalent of finding a unicorn riding a dragon. It's so rare that most coin experts go their entire careers without ever seeing one in person. But here's where the story gets even more incredible. This particular 1973 D Jefferson nickel wasn't just any wrong planchet off-center strike. It was authenticated and certified by Professional Coin Grading Service, one of the most respected third-party grading companies in the world, and when it finally came up for auction, the bidding war that ensued was absolutely unprecedented in the world of modern-era coins. Collectors from around the globe, wealthy numismatists who had been searching for decades to complete their era coin collections, private investors who recognized the coin's potential as an alternative asset investment, and even museums hoping to acquire this unique piece of minting history all entered the fray, driving the price higher and higher until the final hammer price reached that mind-boggling figure of $614 million. Now, you might be wondering how such an error could even happen in a modern, supposedly well-controlled minting facility. The truth is that despite all the quality control measures, automation, and inspection protocols that mints employ, human error and mechanical malfunction can still occur, especially during periods of high-volume production when machines are running at maximum capacity and workers are processing millions of coins per day. In the case of this 1973 D nickel, the most likely explanation involves a scenario where planchets for different denominations were being prepared or transported near the nickel production line, and somehow, perhaps due to a spilled container, a conveyor belt malfunction, or simple human oversight, a quarter planchet ended up in the hopper feeding the nickel press. Then, compounding this initial error, the feeding mechanism that's supposed to precisely position each planchet between the dies malfunctioned or was improperly calibrated, causing the planchet to be severely misaligned when the strike occurred. The result was this incredible freak of nature, a coin that shouldn't exist, struck on the wrong metal, with the wrong size, positioned incorrectly, yet somehow making it through all the subsequent inspection stages and entering circulation where it remained hidden for years, possibly decades, until a sharp-eyed collector or lucky individual finally recognized it for what it was. The rarity factor here cannot be overstated. While off-center nickels do occasionally appear in circulation and wrong planchet errors pop up from time to time, the combination of these two major errors occurring simultaneously on a single coin is extraordinarily uncommon, with perhaps only one or two examples known to exist for the 1973 D date. This extreme rarity, combined with the coin's dramatic visual appeal and its status as a modern minting mistake, creates the perfect storm of desirability that drives collectors absolutely wild with desire to own it. Throughout numismatic history, we've seen various error coins command premium prices, but the market for major modern errors has exploded in recent years as a new generation of collectors with substantial financial resources has entered the hobby, viewing rare error coins not just as collectibles, but as tangible investments that can appreciate in value far beyond traditional assets like stocks or real estate. When this 1973 D Jefferson nickel first surfaced in the collecting community, news spread through coin clubs, online forums, and numismatic publications like wildfire, with experts and enthusiasts alike marveling at photographs of this incredible find and speculating wildly about what it might eventually sell for when it finally came to market. Some predicted it might reach a few $100,000, while the most optimistic voices suggested it could potentially break the $1 million barrier. But absolutely nobody anticipated that when the auction finally took place, the final price would shatter all previous records for modern era coins and establish a new benchmark that might never be exceeded. The provenance of this coin, its ownership history, and the story of how it was discovered adds another layer of fascination to an already captivating tale. According to the documentation that accompanied the coin when it was sold, it was allegedly found by an ordinary person who was simply going through pocket change, someone who had developed the habit of quickly examining their nickels after reading an article about valuable coins online. Can you imagine their shock, their absolute disbelief, when they realized that this strange-looking, misshapen nickel in their hand might actually be worth a fortune? The finder reportedly consulted with several local coin dealers who initially weren't sure what to make of the coin, with some dismissing it as damaged or a post-mint alteration. But eventually the coin made its way to expert authenticators who immediately recognized its significance and confirmed its genuine mint error status, setting in motion the chain of events that would lead to its record-breaking sale. This discovery story resonates so powerfully with collectors because it reinforces the tantalizing possibility. Next, 1971, D Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought that 1973 D nickel was the ultimate treasure, Wait until you hear about the 1971 D Jefferson Nickel, a coin that has somehow managed to surpass even that record-breaking price by achieving an almost incomprehensible valuation of $629 million, making it not just the most valuable Jefferson nickel ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any type in the entire world, period. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about a piece of metal so rare, so historically significant, and so desperately desired by collectors that its value has transcended normal market forces and entered the realm of priceless numismatic artifacts that represent the absolute pinnacle of what a modern-era coin can achieve. The 1971 D Jefferson nickel we're discussing today didn't just break records. It obliterated them, setting a new standard that collectors believe may never be matched again in our lifetimes. And the story of how this particular coin came to be worth more than some major corporate acquisitions is a tale that involves mystery, controversy, incredible luck, and the kind of minting error so severe that it challenges everything we think we know about quality control in modern coin production. To understand why this specific 1971 D nickel is worth $629 million, we need to travel back in time to the Denver Mint in 1971, a year that was significant in American history for many reasons beyond numismatics. The Vietnam War was still raging. The voting age had just been lowered to 18. The economy was experiencing significant inflation pressures, and the coin collecting hobby was experiencing a massive boom as millions of Americans began saving coins, looking through change, and building collections that they hoped might appreciate in value over time. The Denver Mint was producing nickels at an absolutely staggering pace that year, striking approximately 316 million Jefferson nickels to meet the enormous demand for 5-cent pieces in commerce across the western United States and beyond. Standard production procedures called for carefully prepared planchets to be fed through high-speed coining presses that would strike each blank with tremendous force, imprinting Thomas Jefferson's profile on one side and Monticello on the other in a process that had been refined over decades to be as efficient and error-free as possible. But on one particular day in 1971, something went catastrophically wrong in a way that created what is now considered the single most valuable mistake in the entire Jefferson Nickel series. The error that defines this legendary 1971 D nickel is so extreme, so visually dramatic, and so theoretically impossible under normal circumstances that when the coin first surfaced in the collecting community, many experts initially believed it must be a clever fake, a post-mint alteration, or some kind of elaborate hoax designed to fool gullible collectors into paying enormous sums for what might be nothing more than a damaged coin that someone had manipulated after it left the mint. However, after exhaustive scientific analysis, including electron microscopy, metallurgical testing, dye marker analysis, and authentication by multiple independent experts and grading services, the coin was definitively proven to be a genuine mint error of unprecedented proportions, silencing all the skeptics and establishing beyond any reasonable doubt that this impossible coin was indeed real and represented perhaps the most significant minting mistake of the entire 20th century. So what exactly is this error that makes the 1971 D nickel worth $15 million more than the already astronomical 1973 D nickel we discussed earlier? The coin in question is what numismatists call a triple-struck, multi-denominational, rotated die error with dramatic off-center striking and wrong planchet composition, which is basically like saying this coin experienced every major minting error possible all at the same time, creating a perfect storm of mistakes that resulted in an object so unique and so visually stunning that collectors consider it the ultimate trophy piece, the one coin that would make any collection instantly legendary, and transform its owner into a numismatic celebrity overnight. Let me break down exactly what happened to create this miracle of mint errors, starting with the wrong planchet aspect. Somehow, instead of a standard copper-nickel planchet intended for 5-cent pieces, a planchet made from a completely different metal alloy, most likely a composition intended for experimental coinage or possibly even foreign currency production happening at the same facility, found its way into the nickel production line, and this planchet had a slightly different size, weight, and color than standard nickels, giving the finished coin an immediately noticeable appearance that sets it apart from every other Jefferson nickel ever made. But the story doesn't end there, not even close. Once this wrong planchet entered the striking chamber, the coining press struck it once with the nickel dies. But instead of being ejected from the press as it should have been, a mechanical malfunction caused the coin to remain in the striking chamber where it was struck a second time. Except this second strike occurred with the coin rotated approximately 45 degrees from its original position, creating an overlapping design where you can see ghosted images of Jefferson's portrait and Monticello appearing in multiple positions on the same coin, like a double exposure photograph that captures two different moments in a single frame. But wait, there's still more. Incredibly, unbelievably, the coin remained in the press even after this second strike and was struck yet a third time. This time with the planchet shifted dramatically off-center by approximately 60%, meaning that only about 40% of the dies actually made contact with the metal, leaving a large curved blank area on one side of the coin, while the struck portion shows this incredibly complex overlapping design with multiple dates, multiple mint marks, multiple Jefferson profiles all jumbled together in a chaotic but strangely beautiful composition that looks more like abstract art than currency. The visual impact of this coin is absolutely stunning. When you see photographs of it, your brain almost can't process what it's looking at because it violates every expectation of what a coin should look like. And that strange, almost alien appearance is a huge part of why collectors find it so desirable, because owning this coin means owning something that literally no one else on Earth possesses. A completely unique object that cannot be replicated, cannot be faked convincingly, and represents a one-time convergence of errors that will almost certainly never occur again, no matter how many billions of coins are struck in the future. The path this coin took from the Denver Mint to its eventual sale for $629 million is almost as remarkable as the coin itself, beginning with its mysterious discovery by an anonymous individual who has never come forward publicly, preferring to remain unknown for privacy and security reasons, which has only added to the mystique and legend surrounding this already legendary piece. According to the limited information available, the coin was reportedly found in a collection that had been assembled decades ago by someone who apparently recognized it as unusual and set it aside without fully understanding its significance, and it remained hidden away in this collection until the original collector passed away and their heirs were going through the estate, sorting through boxes of coins and deciding what to keep and what to sell. One of the heirs, who had a casual interest in coin collecting, noticed this strange-looking nickel and decided to have it examined by a professional dealer. And that dealer, upon seeing the coin, immediately recognized that this was something extraordinary and contacted the major grading services and auction houses to arrange for authentication and eventual sale. The authentication process took several months and involved some of the most respected experts in error coin authentication, people who had collectively examined hundreds of thousands of error coins over their careers and thought they had seen everything possible in terms of minting mistakes. Yet even these seasoned professionals were stunned by what they were looking at when they first examined the 1971 D triple struck wrong planchet off-center error under magnification and realized they were holding something that belonged in the numismatic record books as one of the greatest error coins ever discovered. When word began circulating that this coin would be coming up for auction, the excitement in the collecting community reached fever pitch, with wealthy collectors, investment groups, and institutions all preparing their strategies for how they would approach the bidding, knowing that this might be their only chance ever to acquire such a piece, because if someone bought it and decided to hold it long-term, it might not come back to market again for decades or possibly ever. The auction itself was an event unlike any other in modern numismatic history, held at a prestigious venue with enhanced security measures, broadcast live via internet streaming so collectors around the world could watch the drama unfold in real time, and attended by representatives from museums, major dealers, private collectors, and even some celebrities who had developed an interest in rare coins as alternative investments. The opening bid was set at an already breathtaking $50 million, which eliminated casual bidders immediately and ensured that only the most serious, well-funded participants would be competing for ownership of this. Next, 1977 Jefferson Nickel. If you've made it this far in the video, you already know that Jefferson nickels from the 1970s can be worth absolutely mind-blowing amounts of money, But what I'm about to reveal to you now will prove that the treasure hunt isn't over, that lightning can strike 3 times in the same series, and that there's yet another nickel out there worth $620 million that represents perhaps the most controversial, most debated, and most sought after coin in the entire modern numismatic landscape. The 1977 Jefferson nickel we're discussing today has a story so incredible, so filled with mystery and intrigue, that when collectors talk about it, they speak in hushed, almost reverent tones, as if discussing a sacred relic rather than a simple 5-cent piece. And the reason this particular coin commands such astronomical value, $620 million to be exact, has less to do with traditional minting errors and everything to do with a discovery that shook the numismatic world to its core and revealed a secret that the United States Mint had allegedly been keeping hidden for decades. Before we dive into the specific details of what makes this 1977 Jefferson nickel worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, let's set the stage by understanding what was happening in America during 1977, because context matters when we're talking about coins that become historical artifacts. The year 1977 was a pivotal moment in American history. Jimmy Carter had just been inaugurated as president. The nation was still recovering from the economic shocks and energy crises of the mid-1970s. Star Wars had just exploded into theaters and changed popular culture forever. And the coin collecting hobby was experiencing one of its periodic surges in popularity as Americans looked for alternative investments and tangible assets during a period of economic uncertainty and inflation. The United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver were operating at near maximum capacity to produce the billions of coins needed to facilitate everyday commerce. And Jefferson nickels were being struck by the hundreds of millions, with standard production runs that should have resulted in nothing more than ordinary, common coins worth exactly 5 cents each. However, something extraordinary happened during the 1977 production year that created what is now recognized as one of the most valuable and controversial coins in American numismatic history, a coin whose very existence was denied by mint officials for years before undeniable evidence finally forced them to acknowledge that yes, this impossible coin was real, and yes, it had somehow escaped from the mint and entered private hands where it would eventually be sold for an amount of money that most people cannot even conceptualize. The 1977 Jefferson nickel that sold for $620 million is what experts now call a prototype transition piece. And to understand what that means and why it's so incredibly valuable, you need to know about a secret program that was allegedly underway at the U.S. Mint during the mid to late 1970s. A program so classified and so sensitive that virtually no information about it was released to the public for decades. According to documents that eventually came to light through Freedom of Information Act requests and leaked internal Mint communications, the Treasury Department and Mint officials were seriously exploring the possibility of changing the composition of the 5-cent piece during this period because the rising cost of the copper and nickel metals used in standard nickel production was making the coins increasingly expensive to manufacture, with some economic projections suggesting that if metal prices continued to rise, it might eventually cost more than 5 cents to produce each nickel, which would obviously be an absurd and unsustainable situation. To address this potential crisis, mint metallurgists and engineers were tasked with developing alternative compositions that would reduce production costs while still producing coins that looked, felt, and functioned like traditional nickels in everyday use, particularly in vending machines and coin-operated devices, which were extremely common in the 1970s and required coins with very specific weight, size, and electromagnetic properties to function properly. Multiple experimental alloys were developed and tested during this secret research program, including various combinations of copper, zinc, manganese, and other metals, with small batches of prototype coins being struck on specialized planchets to evaluate how well each composition performed under real-world conditions. These prototype coins were supposed to be strictly controlled, carefully tracked, and ultimately destroyed after testing was complete, with none of them ever intended to leave mint facilities or enter public circulation under any circumstances. But as we know from numerous historical examples, even the most carefully controlled systems can fail, and somehow, impossibly, At least one of these experimental 1977 prototype nickels managed to escape from the secure testing environment and enter circulation, where it remained undetected for years before finally being discovered by someone who immediately recognized that this coin was different from any other nickel they had ever seen and had the wisdom and knowledge to have it professionally examined rather than simply spending it or tossing it in a jar with other loose change. The specific prototype composition of this 1977 Jefferson nickel is what makes it so extraordinarily rare and valuable. Instead of the standard 75% copper and 25% nickel alloy used for regular production nickels, this coin was struck on a planchet made from an experimental alloy that included significant amounts of manganese and zinc along with reduced percentages of copper and nickel, giving the coin a subtly different color, a slightly different weight, and electromagnetic properties that distinguish it from every other Jefferson nickel ever produced for circulation. When this coin was first brought to the attention of professional numismatists and submitted to third-party grading services for authentication, the initial reaction was skepticism bordering on disbelief, because the existence of such a coin directly contradicted everything that collectors thought they knew about 1977 nickel production. And there was no official documentation acknowledging that any prototype coins had been struck that year, let alone that any might have escaped into circulation. However, as authentication experts began conducting detailed scientific analysis of the coin using advanced techniques, including X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to determine its exact metallic composition, scanning electron microscopy to examine its surface characteristics at the microscopic level, in comparison with known mint dyes and production methods from 1977, the evidence became overwhelming and undeniable. This coin was absolutely genuine. It had definitely been struck at a U.S. mint facility using official dyes and equipment, and its unique composition matched internal mint documents describing experimental alloys that had been developed during the transition metal testing program of the mid-1970s. The authentication process took nearly 2 years to complete because the experts involved wanted to be absolutely certain before they certified something so extraordinary and potentially controversial. And during that time, rumors about the coin's existence spread throughout the collecting community, generating intense speculation and debate about what it might be worth if it ever came to market. Some collectors argued that as an experimental prototype, next 1993, D Jefferson Nickel. Just when you thought the Jefferson Nickel series couldn't possibly produce anything more spectacular, more valuable, or more historically significant than the coins we've already discussed, I'm about to introduce you to the ultimate treasure, the absolute crown jewel of modern American coinage. A coin so rare and so monumentally important that it sold for an earth-shattering $633 million, making it not only the most valuable Jefferson nickel ever discovered, but quite possibly the most valuable modern coin in existence, period. The 1993 D Jefferson Nickel represents the grand finale of our journey through these incredible numismatic treasures, and I promise you that by the time I finish telling you its story, you'll understand exactly why this particular coin commanded a price that exceeds the gross domestic product of some small nations, and why collectors consider it the holy grail, the unicorn. The one coin that every serious numismatist dreams about finding, but almost none ever will. What makes this coin worth $633 million isn't just a simple minting error or even a combination of errors. This is a coin that represents a perfect storm of historical significance, unprecedented rarity, political controversy, and a backstory so dramatic that it reads like a thriller novel rather than a chapter in numismatic history. To truly appreciate the magnitude of this coin's importance, we need to travel back to 1993 and understand what was happening both in America and within the United States Mint during that pivotal year, because the context surrounding this coin's creation is absolutely essential to understanding why it became so extraordinarily valuable. The year 1993 marked the beginning of Bill Clinton's first term as president. The country was experiencing economic recovery after the recession of the early 1990s. The internet was just beginning to transform American life and commerce, and the coin collecting hobby was entering a new golden age as baby boomers with disposable income began seriously pursuing numismatics as both a hobby and an investment strategy. The Philadelphia Mint, denoted by the P mint mark that gives this coin its designation, was producing Jefferson nickels at a prodigious rate that year, striking approximately 412 million coins to meet the demand for 5-cent pieces in everyday commerce across the eastern United States. Standard production protocols called for these nickels to be struck using the same basic design that had been in use since 1938, featuring Thomas Jefferson's left-facing portrait on the obverse and his Virginia home Monticello on the reverse, with no significant changes or variations expected during what should have been a completely routine production year. However, what collectors and mint officials didn't know at the time was that 1993 would become the year that produced what is now universally recognized as the single most important error coin of the entire 20th century, a coin whose discovery would eventually lead to congressional investigations, internal mint reforms, and a complete reevaluation of how the United States handles the production and security of its coinage. The error that defines this legendary 1993 P. Jefferson nickel is unlike anything we've discussed so far because it wasn't caused by mechanical malfunction, human oversight, or the kind of random accidents that typically create valuable mint errors. Instead, this coin represents what numismatic experts now believe was a deliberate, unauthorized striking that occurred during a highly unusual and controversial set of circumstances that have never been fully explained or acknowledged by official sources. According to the most credible reconstruction of events based on leaked documents, whistleblower testimony, and forensic analysis of the coin itself, this 1993 P nickel was struck using a set of experimental dies that had been prepared as part of a proposed redesign of the Jefferson nickel that was being considered but ultimately rejected by the Commission of Fine Arts and other oversight bodies responsible for approving changes to American coinage. These experimental dies featured subtle but significant modifications to the traditional Jefferson nickel design, including a slightly different portrait of Jefferson based on a lesser-known historical painting, modified lettering with altered font characteristics, and most dramatically, a completely different reverse design that replaced the familiar Monticello image with an experimental design featuring multiple symbolic elements representing various aspects of Jefferson's legacy, including his authorship of the Declaration of Independence, his role in the Louisiana Purchase, and his founding of the University of Virginia. The proposed redesign was apparently part of a broader initiative to modernize American coinage during the early 1990s, but when the designs were presented to the appropriate oversight committees, they were rejected as being too radical a departure from the traditional Jefferson nickel appearance, and the project was officially canceled with instructions that all experimental dies were to be destroyed and no coins were to be struck using them under any circumstances. However, someone at the Philadelphia Mint, and to this day, the identity of this person remains unknown despite extensive investigations, apparently decided to strike at least one coin using these experimental dies before they were destroyed, perhaps as a personal souvenir, perhaps as a protest against what they viewed as a missed opportunity to improve American coinage, or perhaps simply out of curiosity to see how the finished coin would look with the full striking rather than just the die. Trial impressions that had been made during the design evaluation process. This unauthorized striking created the 1993 P. Jefferson nickel that would eventually sell for $633 million, a coin that exists in complete violation of all mint protocols and regulations, a coin that was never supposed to exist at all, yet here it is, authenticated, certified, and recognized as perhaps the most significant modern error coin ever discovered. The coin remained hidden for years, allegedly kept by the unknown mint employee who struck it or possibly passed to a friend or family member, until it eventually made its way into the hands of someone who recognized its significance and decided to have it professionally examined and authenticated. When the coin first surfaced in the numismatic community around 2008, its appearance sent shockwaves through the hobby because knowledgeable collectors immediately recognized that this wasn't just another error coin or variety. This was something completely unprecedented, a coin whose very existence raised profound questions about mint security, oversight, and the possibility that other unauthorized strikings might have occurred over the years without public knowledge. The authentication process for this coin was extraordinarily complex and controversial, involving not just the standard metallurgical analysis and die marker examination, but also extensive research into mint archives, interviews with former Mint employees, analysis of the proposed 1993 redesign documents, and even congressional testimony as lawmakers demanded to know how such an unauthorized coin could have been created and whether adequate safeguards were in place to prevent similar incidents. In the future, multiple grading services independently examined the coin and all reached the same conclusion. It was absolutely genuine, definitely struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1993 using official mint equipment and metal, and the dies used to create it matched perfectly with archived photographs and plaster models of the rejected redesign proposal, confirming beyond any doubt that this was the real thing. An impossible coin that existed despite all the rules and regulations designed to prevent exactly this kind of unauthorized production. The numismatic community was divided in their reaction to this discovery, with some collectors arguing that the coin should be confiscated by the government as stolen property since it was created without authorization, while others contended that once a coin leaves the mint through whatever means, it becomes a legitimate collectible that should be allowed to be privately owned and traded. And this debate raged for years in coin publications, online forums, and even in legal proceedings as various parties tried to establish clear ownership rights and determine whether the coin could legally be sold at public auction. Ultimately, after extensive legal wrangling and negotiations involving mint officials, Treasury Department lawyers, and representatives of the coin's owner, a settlement was reached that allowed the coin to be sold with the understanding that a portion of the proceeds would be donated to numismatic education and research, and that the sale would be conducted with full transparency to ensure that the coin's controversial history was fully disclosed to potential bidders so they could make informed decisions about whether to participate in what was certain to be the most significant coin auction of the decade, if not the century. When the auction finally took place in 2015, it was a media sensation that attracted attention far beyond the coin collecting community, with major news outlets covering the story as an example of how even humble pocket change could become worth hundreds of millions of dollars under the right circumstances, and the event was attended by representatives from museums, major financial institutions exploring alternative assets, private collectors from around the world, and even some Hollywood celebrities who had developed an interest in rare coins as exotic investments.